Welcome back to the deep dive. Today, we are stripping away the wallpaper and looking at the structural beams of property law. If you're a learner who wants to understand not just what the law says, but how it thinks, well, you are in the right place. We have a stack of documents here focused on a 1974 case, Centex Homes Corp v. Boag. And on the surface, it looks like a dry dispute over a condo deposit. But when you peel back the layers, this is actually a battle over the definition of uniqueness. We generally assume all real estate is unique, right?
Right.
That allows sellers to force buyers to close a deal. But what happens when that real estate looks a lot less like a countryside manor and a lot more like a mass-produced product?
And that is the friction point.
Mhm.
It's really where we're looking at the transition from land as this unique, irreplaceable asset to land as a commodity. To do that, we're going to perform a deep surgical analysis of the shift from the historical mutuality of remedy doctrine to the much more modern test of inadequacy of damages.
Okay, the mission is clear. We need to figure out when a developer can compel a buyer to purchase a property against their will. Can they actually force you to close? So let's start with the foundations. Concept 1, the historical justification for specific performance. Why, historically, has equity granted specific performance for land contracts at all?
To understand this, you really have to go back and look at the general rule, as described by legal scholars like Pomeroy and Williston. Historically, the rule rests on two main pillars. The first element is uniqueness. English common law viewed every single plot of land as having a distinct character: the soil, the location, the view. Because it was unique, money damages were presumed to be inadequate. You can't pay someone to replace the irreplaceable.
Right, if I promise to sell you the Mona Lisa and then I break that promise, giving you $1 million, well, that doesn't get you the Mona Lisa. Land was treated the same way. But what's the second pillar?
The second element is mutuality of remedy. This is an old English precedent. It basically held that if a buyer could sue for the land, because the land is unique, then fairness dictated that the seller must also be allowed to sue for the price.
So it's a mirror image. If I can force you to sell, you should be able to force me to buy.
Precisely. It was all about symmetry, not necessarily, logic. The seller gets money, which isn't unique at all, but they were granted specific performance just to keep things even.
Okay, that makes sense for a feudal estate. But here's the conflict. Does that historical rule really apply to a massive modern condominium complex?
That is the whole question. And there's a friction point here about what kind of property we're even talking about. We have to distinguish between a cooperative and a condominium.
Mm-hmm.
The court in our case actually looks at a New York case, Silverman v. Alcoa Plaza Associates, just for comparison. In a co-op, you're buying shares of stock and a lease. That's considered personal property.
Mm.
But a condo is technically real property. You get a deed.
So, on paper, a condo is real estate.
Ah.
And if it's real estate, the old rules say it's unique. But does the reality match the theory? Let's find out. Let's analyze Centex Homes Corp v. Boag. First, what are the legally dispositive facts?
Okay, here's the situation. The plaintiff is Centex Homes Corporation. They're the developer of this massive luxury high-rise project in Cliffside Park in Fort Lee, New Jersey. I mean, we're talking about 6 buildings and a staggering 3,600 units.
That's a small city.
It is. The defendants are Eugene and Virginia Boag. On September 13, 1972, they signed a contract to purchase unit number 2019. The price was $73,700.
A steal by today's standards, but significant money back then.
Oh, absolutely. Now, here's the breach. Shortly after signing, Mr. Boag is notified that he's being transferred to Chicago for work. So he tells Centex, I can't complete the purchase. He had written a check for $6,870 as a down payment, but he immediately stopped payment on it.
So the deal falls apart almost before it begins.
Correct. So Centex sues. Their action is a request for specific performance. They are literally asking the court to force the Boags to pay the full price and take the condo. Or, in the alternative, they want liquidated damages.
And what was the core legal issue?
The precise question is this: will the equitable remedy of specific performance lie for the enforcement of a contract for the sale of a condominium apartment unit by a vendor?
In other words, can we force this sale? What rule of law did the court apply? Please state the full black-letter rule and break it down into its testable elements for us.
The court applied a rule from the case Fleischer v. James Drugstore, which explicitly rejects that old mutuality doctrine. The rule has 3 distinct elements. Element 1. Specific performance is discretionary. It's not automatic. Element 2. The mutuality of remedy doctrine is defunct. The test is whether the obligations of the contract are mutual, not whether the remedy is identical for both sides. And Element 3. The remedy is confined to cases where the vendor will suffer an economic injury for which the damage remedy at law, meaning money, is inadequate.
Thank you. Now, for the court's elemental analysis. Let's walk through this step by step. How did the court apply that first element, their rejection of mutuality of remedy?
Right. So the sub-issue here is, can the vendor, Centex, claim specific performance just because the buyer, Boag, could have? The court cites Fleischer to say absolutely not. The analysis is that the fact that a remedy is available to one party doesn't automatically make it available to the other. The court explicitly holds that this mutuality concept is no longer a valid reason to grant specific performance to a seller.
Understood. So that old argument is off the table. Now, what about the second element, the inadequacy of legal damages and the nature of the property? This seems like the heart of the case.
It is. The sub-issue is really simple. Is a condominium unit unique land? Because if it is unique, money isn't good enough. If it's not, money's perfectly fine.
And how did the court analyze this? What did they look at?
The court looked at the reality of the property, and the fact application here is just crucial. The project has 3,600 units. The court noted they are virtually identical. They're sold by sample, meaning you look at a model apartment, not the specific unit you're buying, and the pricing is all fixed by a schedule.
It sounds just like buying a car.
That is the exact comparison the court makes. Even though the condo is technically real estate, you get a deed and all that, it has all the characteristics of personal property sold in a marketplace. So the finding is that the subject matter here has no unique quality. Therefore, the damages are really easy to measure in money. If Centex sold it to someone else for less, they could just sue for the difference. The remedy at law is adequate.
And after analyzing all the elements, what was the court's final conclusion on that first count?
The complaint for specific performance is dismissed. There's simply no jurisdiction for equitable relief because the legal remedy money damages is completely adequate. The developer cannot force the Boags to buy that condo.
Wow. That is a massive shift in how we view real estate. It really strips the magic away from the condo. But Centex didn't just ask for specific performance, they also asked for money. So let's analyze the liquidated damages clause. What are the facts here regarding the payment?
The facts are simple, but very technical. The Boags paid a $525 deposit initially. Then Boag gave that check for $6,870, but he stopped payment on it. The rule comes from the contract language itself. And the clause, which Centex wrote, limited liquidated damages to monies paid at the time of the default.
Money's paid. That phrasing seems critical. How did the court apply the facts to that contractual rule?
Well, the analysis is what we call strict construction against the drafter. Centex wrote the contract, so they are stuck with the definitions they chose. The court held that a stopped check does not constitute monies paid. Since the check was never honored by the bank, that money was never actually paid to Centex.
So the check is just a piece of paper in the end.
Exactly. So the conclusion is that Centex is limited to keeping only the $525 that was actually paid in cash or, cleared funds. The claim for the $6,800 check is dismissed.
That is a harsh lesson in contract drafting for Centex. If they had just written monies payable or monies committed, they might have gotten that $6,000.
Oh, very likely, yes. They completely limited themselves with their own language.
I want to step back for a moment. This whole case hinges on the difference between unique realty and mass-produced realty. It can feel a bit abstract. I need a visceral hypothetical to really solidify this distinction. Can you paint me a picture?
Absolutely. Let's use two scenarios to make this stick. Hypothetical A. The unique. Imagine a specific, oddly shaped plot of land out in the countryside. On it sits a historic 18th century farmhouse. It has a specific view of a creek, the floorboards have a certain creak, and the light hits the kitchen in a way that just cannot be replicated anywhere else on earth. If you contract to buy this and the seller backs out, you can force them to sell. Why? Because if they just gave you $1 million, you still couldn't go out and buy that farmhouse. There is no substitute. Specific performance applies.
Okay, I can see that. That is the classic land is unique scenario. Now, give me the counterexample.
Hypothetical B. The Centex condo. Now, imagine a car dealership. You walk in to buy a Ford Taurus. There are 500 of them on the lot. Same color, same engine, same interior. You pick one out of a catalog, sold by sample. If you set contract for one and then back out, the dealer doesn't force you to drive the car home, right?
No, of course not.
The dealer just sells it to the next person. If they lose money on the resale, they sue you for the difference in price. The Centex court is saying the condo is the Ford Taurus. It's a box of space in the sky, identical to the box next to it and the box above it. It's a product. Therefore, the seller doesn't need to force you to take it. They could just sell it to someone else and sue you for the lost profit.
That distinction, the farmhouse versus the Ford Taurus, that really clarifies why the court stripped the equitable remedy away. It's all about fungibility.
Precisely.
Yeah.
Equity only steps in when the law falls short. If the asset is fungible, money can fix the breach. The law doesn't need to step in with the heavy hand of specific performance.
We've dissected the case, the history, the policy. Now, I want to synthesize all this for the learner. If you are facing a fact pattern on an exam or a real-world scenario, how do you diagnose whether specific performance is available to a seller?
Okay, we can boil this all down to a diagnostic checklist for specific performance, specifically from the vendor's perspective. Step 1. Check the jurisdiction. Has the jurisdiction abolished the mutuality of remedy doctrine? If they still hold to that old English rule, specific performance might be automatic. But if they follow the modern trend, like New Jersey, you proceed to Step 2. Step 2. Analyze the property. Is it truly unique, or is it mass-produced? Look for the Centex factors. Is it a high-rise, or are there hundreds of units? Is it sold by sample or from a model? If it's a condo in a mega-complex, it's likely going to be treated as personal LD for remedies. If it's a custom home or a plot of raw land, it remains unique. Step 3. Test adequacy of damages. Can the seller's loss be easily calculated in money? If the unit could just be resold and the difference in price calculated, specific performance is out. The legal remedy is adequate. And finally, Step 4. Review the contract language. This is for the damages side. Look strictly at the specific wording. Does it say money's paid or money's payable? As we saw with the stop check, that precise wording determines whether you get the deposit or the whole down payment.
That is a really powerful framework. It turns a fuzzy concept into a clear decision tree. Okay, let's unpack this final takeaway. The big idea here is that the label real estate is not some magic wand. It doesn't automatically grant you these special equitable powers if the property functions just like a commodity. The law is looking at the substance, not the form.
That is the key. The law is catching up to the economic reality. When you industrialize the creation of housing, you move it from the realm of estates to the realm of inventory.
And here is where it gets really interesting for the future. I mean, if 3,600 condos are considered personal property for the sake of remedies because they're mass-produced and fungible, what happens when we look at the digital age?
Here's a provocative closing thought for you to mull over. We're seeing the rise of digital assets, NFTs, digital land in the metaverse. They're often marketed as unique and one of a kind. But are they? If an algorithm generates 10,000 variations of a digital image and they're sold by sample, are they unique art? Or are they just the digital equivalent of a Centex condo? As assets become more and more commoditized, the ancient protections of equity might just retreat even further.
That is a fascinating frontier. The definition of unique is going to be the battleground for the next century of property law, I think.
And we will be here to dive into it. Thank you for listening to this deep dive. Keep questioning the labels, and we will see you next time.